This month I'm going to be taking part once again in JD Ray Reid's Polarathon, and I have a couple of books in mind. These books are actually going to use up pretty much the last of the polar fantasies on my Goodreads TBR shelf. I don't think I have anything else lying about, so I'm just hoping these fit the vibe. I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out this year on the TBR videos, on the reading vlogs that come out, on the wrap-ups, to see if I can find some new polar fantasies to add to my TBR for next year. So if you've got any suggestions for those, please do leave them for me in the comments. My goal for this month is to get through the 3 that I do have. The first one that I'm going to be picking up is Midnight in Everwood by M.A. Kunizar. I'm at page 24 or chapter 5. I'm starting to get a sense of the book itself, the writing, to decide whether or not I'm going to continue with it and I'm going to keep it. If I'm honest, going into it, I was already leaning towards DNFing it, putting it in the charity shop. So it is going to have to work a little bit harder to win me round. But at the moment I'm interested. We are heavily in that early 1900s setting. There's really no magical elements so far to speak of. Main character Marietta, her family, the different pressures I guess on Marietta. She really wants to be a dancer. She loves ballet, she loves dancing and performing, and she's been so far able to do that. But now that she's approaching her 21st birthday, her parents are becoming far more insistent that she has to get married and give it up. Enter the mysterious Dr. Drosselmeyer to Nottingham society. He's very much a catch at the moment. All of the eligible young women, all of the mothers of the eligible young women are very interested in him, even though they are already looking down on him because he's a toy maker. The fact that he clearly has money has intrigued them. Arietta's mother is very much pushing for her to be at the front of the pack. I actually had thought that this was going to be a YA book, and when I started reading it, even more so, I had pegged it as lower YA, just from the writing. So I was a little bit surprised when we first got a reference point for Marietta's age. The writing, I don't read this as adult fantasy. It is very descriptive. There's a lot of pretty prose in it, lots of metaphors and flowery descriptions, but rather than feeling like a really rich adult prose that you can sink into, it sometimes feels a little bit like it's trying too hard. It's making some of these references, these descriptions feel a little bit too on the nose, which I think is feeding me into that kind of more young YA, even middle grade language, and that's just a little bit disjointive, maybe. I think if this is meant to be an adult Nutcracker retelling, I want it to be darker. The moment Marietta feels quite young to me as a protagonist, and it all has that very 16-year-old coming out, rebelling against her family vibe to it. I kind of want more of a darkness, more of a maturity to it. I don't know if that's going to come through. I have had a look at reviews and they do say it's a slow start, but then it really kicks up and that the world is very magical and very lush. And I'm definitely getting that in, even though I think the writing feels quite middle grade, it feels quite magical and dreamy. And I can see that when we go into a fantastical world, it's going to have that very beautiful element of the Nutcracker. So I'm going to give it a bit longer. So I'm thinking if I'm at page 25 right now, maybe I give it to page 50, page 75 before I make a firm decision one way or the other. Midnight in Everwood actually managed to really surprise me. Marietta is kind of trapped in a situation where what's going to happen feels inevitable, but she really doesn't want to give up on this dream. She is trying as a protagonist to do something about that. She sneaks out, she angers her family by going to auditions they forbid. She's not a shrinking violet, even in this early section. But the book does take a real turn. Everything amps up a notch when Marietta finds herself travelling through a Narnia-like doorway to Everwood. On the face of it, Everwood is very magical, it's very sweet, quite literally. There's lots of descriptions of the scenery as smelling like various types of candies. It's all very sugar spun, very the Nutcracker inspired. This has a really light and magical tone to it that feels very whimsical in an adult novel, but did kind of, I think, feed into the problems I'd had with thinking this might be something younger. Everwood, it turns out, is a queer normative world. It's a fairly colourblind world. It's very almost utopian. And Marietta finds herself at the palace, at a grand ball, meeting the king, winning over his favour with her dancing. It's a dream world and it's perfect. And that contrasts really starkly with where the novel goes next, because it takes a sharp turn and becomes so much darker. And that's the point where it really began to feel like an adult novel to me. Marietta's concerns and her suffering would have felt very out of place in something YA. But it actually really worked, and I think that's where the book began to win me over. Whether it's just because I personally prefer my stories to have a bit of bite to them, or whether it is the contrast between that fairy tale Nutcracker beautiful soft opening to the book and what becomes much more dangerous and sharp as we enter the kind of second half.
Even the language of the book seems to feed into this contrast. The language and the metaphors and the description maintain that really sugar-spun, fairy tale, confectionery heavy world.
The snow was crisp and firm, forging a path of granulated sugar. Marietta wandered deeper into the enchantment. It was heavy with the scent of forest, snow and marzipan. Emerald fir trees towered up, brushing against the midnight patchwork of constellations. And that language contrasts so starkly with what is happening. Marietta finds out that her invitation to stay with the king is maybe not so much an invitation, and the book becomes a lot darker as we enter a forced captivity phase, as we see her suffering when she tries to rebel against this captivity. She's rebelled in our world and suffered punishments for it, but nothing compares to what happens here. Withholding of food to the point that without some assistance she probably would have starved. There is almost an element of body horror in that her limbs are almost taken control of by the king. When she refuses to dance anymore, her feet are starting to bleed. He uses magic to force her to keep going and keep going and keep going until she dances her feet into a bloodied mess. We also see some of her allies suffer various punishments on her behalf. There's definitely physical punishments going on as well as the psychological. Through all this, we do see Marietta make some alliances, notably her two cellmates, Dilara and Perlapata. They are really fantastic, and I love the way the three women bond, the way they form a sisterhood, the way they help each other out, taking the blame for each other's actions, causing diversions. And although this book is marketed largely as a romance, and I did completely buy the romance that Marietta has in this with the captain of the guard, their romance is very slow burn and comes to a head very much right at the end. And I really enjoyed that romance, but for me the star of the show was the relationship between the three women, what they forged, that sisterhood through captivity, and what they're willing to risk to defend each other, what Marietta is willing to give up to go back for those women. It all really came to a nice head. I really felt that I had seen through that really mundane almost world that we start into that first magical moment as we arrive in Everwood, and then through the darkness and the trials that they face. I really felt that we saw those relationships develop and that we saw Marietta, especially as a character, grow so much. She goes on a huge journey, and all of the things that we saw in her at the beginning, that drive, that determination, her dreams, it just feels like it really solidifies in her. And when she returns to our world, we see a woman who is still the woman she was. The seeds of that were always there, but has fully reached her final form. So the issues that I had with it right at the start almost come full circle and tie into one of the book's strengths. Marietta does feel quite young at the start, but she has such a journey to go on. She does feel quite naive, but she becomes slightly more jaded and then goes past that into a quiet strength and confidence. And it all just really worked really, really well. I'm really glad I stuck with it because I did consider DNFing it when last I spoke to you. And I think this was one that was definitely worth reading. I have already started listening to the audio of The North Wind by Alexandra Warwick. I think so far I'm sitting around the 20% mark, so nothing that I'm going to talk about is really that spoilery. This is all really set up. We have a very barren winter fantasy world where there's almost an area even beyond this really struggling, desolate township where shadows and ice and monsters are said to roam. We have a godlike king, or a king-like god, the North Wind, Boreas, who comes to this village once every 30 or so years. The village selects a sample of women to offer to him, and at the end of the meal he picks one and takes them away with him, as far as the villagers are aware, to be sacrificed. It's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and that probably colours the fact that I did see a lot of A Court of Thorns and Roses in this, but Ren is just, she's a real amped up version of a lot of your beauty characters. She is a huntress who has made lots of sacrifices to look after her twin sister, who she thinks of as more beautiful, more delicate, more pure. She has a scar on her face that's not been quite explained. She has a drinking habit, and she's at some point in the past sold herself or her body to make ends meet. And when her sister is picked as one of the 7 potential sacrifices, Ren is very, very displeased about this. She goes to the meal and ultimately lets her temper kind of get away with her. And there's no pleading, there's no begging, there's nothing. She stabs that man in the gut. He's a god, so it doesn't exactly work in her favour, but you have to give her points for just balls to the wallness. Like, she isn't messing about. There's no, oh please, don't take my sister. She flat out stabs him. Obviously, her sister is the one that is chosen, but Ren maybe drugs her. And then in disguise goes with our Northwind god to his realm, where it turns out that these women aren't being sacrificed immediately. They're being married to him so that he can use their blood, the blood of his queen, his human queen specifically, to renew the protections that he offers the land. Ren is very, very unhappy about this, but manages to keep her identity a secret until after the marriage, so neither of them are exactly chuffed with where they've ended up here. And this is just giving me very, very enemies to lovers. I'm enjoying Alexandra Warwick's writing, and I think she's done a really great job of not being afraid to make her protagonist slightly brittle and damaged. You definitely get the feeling that Ren could snap at any moment and take everyone out with her. The enemies to lovers is on that really extreme side of the enemies scale, which I personally like. If you're gonna sell me enemies to lovers, I want them to despise each other with valid reason at the start. I hate enemies to lovers and it's just like they disagree over table settings. Like, make them hate each other. And also don't just make them hate each other for no reason. This gives you a good reason for them to really dislike each other at the start. They treat each other terribly. And I think that's going to really sell when the romance eventually comes through. But I'll let you know how it's going once I get a little bit further through. I'm still getting over my cold, so I'm really sorry if this is a bit of a mess. But I've decided to DNF the North Wind. I did really enjoy that start of it. I thought that Ren was a really interesting character. It had a great setup. This one definitely does what it says on the tin. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling with a smidgen of Persephone and Hades mixed in, all set in a wintry polar fantasy type of world. And I was really, really excited to be reading it. I was enjoying it at first. I don't know whether this one is just too long, and because it's so much longer, every aspect feels really drawn out. I just found that by the time I reached the middle, which is where I stopped at the end of part 1, just before we go into part 2, I just lost interest. This one's really disappointing because of the 3 books I planned to pick up, this was the one that I was the most confident of. It was the one that I really did see myself reading the other 3 books in the quartet as well. They have those stunning, stunning covers. Originally, I thought that it was going to be one story over a quartet, but then midway through, well, not midway, but part of the way through this one, I kind of came to the realization that it's more likely to be doing the follow a different couple in each book, which was interesting, exciting, because essentially I suppose I could still try those, because they do seem like they won't be as connected to each other as I thought. But honestly, this one, it wasn't bad. But oddly, I think I maybe wanted some more of the romance, which isn't the side I usually come down on in another situation. Maybe it's because I'm not firing on all cylinders, but I think I could have enjoyed this. I think there's still, like, if I picked it up at a different time and came back to it, maybe I would get more from it. Maybe this is a soft DNF rather than a full hard scouring the earth DNF. Or at least I think I'm going to think of it as a soft DNF, and that'll make it easier to set it aside. I've been listening to it, and again, I don't know whether that has maybe been a problem. Usually when I'm listening to audiobooks, I don't have a problem with keeping my focus. I usually listen to them while I'm doing something else. But this one, I found that my kind of attention was wandering, my thoughts were wandering, and it just wasn't gripping me that same way. And then more importantly, I found that once I had put it down, I wasn't excited to get back to it. It felt like it was going to be a chore, something I need to get another however much read, rather than being really excited to see what happened next. And as with every year, because I've been saying this year I want to DNF more when I'm not enjoying it, I feel like if I'm not excited to get back to it, that's the sign that I should be DNFing it, and so that's what I'm going to do. I do still have one more book on this vlog before I resort to some of the rereads that I was going to do for Polarathon, but it's by the same author. This is another Alexandria Warwick book. I think it's very different. I think it's not a romantasy in the same way. So we're going to see how that goes. If Below isn't a success, then I might dig out one of those rereads I was talking about. Maybe, I don't think I'm in the mood for Winter Night. I think that would be beyond me right now. I don't know. I think all of the rereads I had in mind are quite heavy books too. We're fingers crossed that Below works. That's what we're doing. And I'll get back to you once I have a better idea what I'm doing. So I've managed to lose both sets of my current prescription glasses. So this week's gone really, really well. They'll turn up somewhere, and I have spares, it's fine. But like, this week is just... On the other hand, Below, Redemption. I think this one was published before The North Wind, but this series is still in progress where the North Wind one has all wrapped up, so this is still in progress. It's also YA. At first I felt like the writing was maybe a little bit choppier than The North Wind, but partly that could be that this book was published earlier, so Alexandria Warwick's writing has improved. Or it could just be that this is YA and The North Wind was adult, so that one's just a little bit more fluid in terms of writing style. I don't know. But other than that tiny, tiny little, it's not even a gripe because it might be intentional. This one, this was so good. This was what I wanted. This one, Redemption. And yeah, this book, I should say right at the start, this one is heavily inspired by Inuit mythology, and I am almost entirely sure I'm going to mispronounce something, so I do apologise. But this book follows Ape. She's a young woman, you know, a teenager, I guess. Although that's never exactly specified how old she is, which is maybe if I had one niggle, it's that maybe the age of our protagonists, the setting, if we're meant to be in a historical or a completely fantasy world, a time frame, maybe that could be hammered down a little more firmly at the beginning. But Appy is an older sister. A little bit like Ren, has been kind of set up to be the self-reliant one, the provider, the protector between her and her sister. Although with Appy and Eska, her sister, it feels far more Appy has put this on herself rather than in the North Wind. It felt a little bit like Ren was given those responsibilities. Appy chooses to look after her sister. Her sister seems very appreciative of that. There's a very loving bond between the sisters that is what I had wanted and saw at the beginning of the North Wind, and then the North Wind kind of changed that and I wasn't in it. Anyway, this one, the sister relationship is great. Appy is the kind of provider. She wants to go out and hunt. She is out hunting to provide for her sister, for her parents, because her father is like the greatest hunter in their people, their tribe or community, but he's currently injured. Appy really wants to prove herself. She wants to be given like the lead of a hunt, but her parents don't seem to see that ability in her. They don't see that leadership quality in her. So she's very much trying to prove herself. And then one day the face stealer comes and takes her sister's face. This is like a monster that has visited their community before. It's not something unheard of, but it's a demon or some kind of creature that, I mean, literally does, he steals people's faces, and then they're left, they can hear, but they can't see or taste or talk, I suppose. They can still breathe, and I think they can somehow, they still get sustenance. But Appy says that, you know, everyone that this usually happens to very quickly, they maybe walk out into the snow or they retreat into their own mind, they go a bit kind of mad. I guess it's meant to be really isolating, kind of like a living death type of thing. So when this happens to her sister, Appy wants to go after the face stealer. She wants to get Eska's face back, and she wants to kill the monster who she sees as having been terrorizing her community. Her parents are very like, no, because you're gonna fail and then we're gonna have no daughters, which is like mean on multiple levels, because Appy is like, so you don't think I can do it then? But also Eska's right there being told that she doesn't count anymore, so it's harsh. But Appy decides to go off, which I really liked as a character, that you do get that traditional YA, I know everything comes back to Katniss, but you do get that traditional YA, I want to protect my sister so I will take this sacrifice for myself, that we see so often, and I love it. But with Appy you also get this slightly darker undertone that I feel maybe is something that was trying to work with Ren as well, that she was doing it for her sister, but it was never interrogated too closely, whereas Appy, we're very aware she's doing it for her sister, first and foremost, absolutely. But she is also self-aware enough to know that there is a slightly darker side to her personality. She's aware that as much as she does want to save her sister, she has another motivation. Her other motivation is to prove herself to her father, to her mother, to her community, to get that kind of leadership view, to be viewed in that light, the way she's wanted, and the way that they don't think she's capable of, and the way that I think as the book goes through, she secretly doesn't think she's capable of either, even though it's what she really wants. And so it just gives her that little bit of a selfish, her motive isn't selfish, but there's a little bit of an edge to it, I guess. And that's really nice then to see how it plays out, because as she goes through the various trials she goes through, she obviously has to make choices, both choices that are about herself, about others, in relation to choosing one person over another, choosing her mission over other people, or vice versa. And having that little slither of a darker motive makes those choices feel more poignant. There's a little bit more of a kind of unsureness over what she'll pick in any given situation, because she is really brave, she is really loyal, she defends the allies and friends that she makes along the way with everything. She's very self-sacrificing, the way we expect our YA protagonists to be. But you do always have that inkling at the back of your head that if it comes to a choice between someone and her sister, or how she views herself, that desire to be kind of respected and to be held up as a great hunter or a great leader or a great tracker, what's she gonna pick? And I thought that just made her really interesting. She goes after her sister Very early in the book, the setup is that she falters on the ice, she's tired, she's worn out, there's a snowstorm, and she wakes up in a kind of ice palace labyrinth. In between world, it's not actually our world, lorded over by the face stealer, partly, but also this very young looking girl called Yuki. And Yuki essentially sets Appy lots of different challenges where she's like, if you can find this face I want hidden in the labyrinth, then you can go and look for your own. Or if you can fight this monster, then you can give your friend something she needs. And there's just lots of challenges along the way. It's really, really good. I really enjoyed it. It had an element, I guess, of trials to it. Not so much that I would call it a trial fantasy. It's not got that kind of regimentedness of competition. There's just lots of things that she's trying to do while she escapes captivity, because she is held captive, other people are held captive. I will say that this book, there's definitely some triggers to be looked up. There is death of an animal that was really, really heartbreaking. There is captivity of lots of people and all of the things that come with that. There's malnutrition and starvation and drowning and frostbite and lots of different all the kind of challenges you would imagine that this ice fortress world could present. But there's also some great representation there. Appy has hearing, but her grandmother is deaf, so she and her family are all completely fluent in sign language, and you see them using that to communicate with each other at the beginning of the book. But then while she's in Yuki's fortress, she makes an ally who is deaf, and this character becomes very much a secondary character, and the two of them, almost all of their communication then is through sign language. And I thought it came off as really well represented in the book. The character that is deaf is presented as intelligent and smart and compassionate and just as every bit as brave as Appy. She's very competent. The two of them work together really well, and I really liked the dynamic between the two girls. The pacing was great. The book was really, really readable. I had no problem focusing on it, which this week has been a challenge. Absolutely no problem. I was hooked. I got through, I think it's like 400 pages, and I got through it in maybe like 2 or 3 settings. It was really, really good. Lots of action, lots of emotion, lots of conflict. The setting was fantastic, really original. I don't think I've ever read anything else that's used Inuit mythology. I don't know anything about that mythology. I don't know how much of this is characters that we are actually taking from lore and how much of it is Alexandria Warwick's own creation, but it all felt very blended together, very cohesive as a world. The characters all felt very cohesive and like they belonged together. And for a YA novel, I really did feel like she was very brave. Some of it was very, very dark. There were very brutal moments, incredibly tough choices. Again, those triggers, definitely check them out. And if you want more information, then let me know. But it was a really bold YA story. It didn't sugarcoat things. You're gonna do this kind of story where lives are in danger, people are being held hostage, or they're imprisoned for, in some of these prisoners that she finds, years, decades, to the point where they can't even remember their own names. Appy is going through just about every kind of hardship she can through those trials, physically and mentally, and her sense of dignity, her sense of who she is, the community she's part of, all of that is stripped away from her piece by piece, and she is forced to make the worst choices, the worst sacrifices that you can imagine. And Alexandria Warwick really doesn't then try and hide from it. She doesn't hide it in jokes. She doesn't lighten the tone. You are really very much aware of how much Appy's going through, to the point where that side of it all felt much more adult to me. I'm really, really looking forward to picking up the next one in the series, which I think might be called Hunt. Or Hunt might be the third one. It might be The Woods or something like that. I'm really looking forward to whatever it is. I'm really looking forward to reading it. And once I've read all the books that are available in the North series, which is the one that starts with Below, if that 4th book isn't available yet, because I think there's a 4th book coming, then I might be tempted to go back and try the Winds books again and see if maybe I've just not been in the right headspace for them, because this one was so good. This is the kind of book that, see, if this had been the first book that I'd read by this author, I would immediately be like, author by author, go grab the entire backlist and start working through it, because this was a 5-star read. It was fantastic. And I'm just a little bit almost confused as to how the experience with the two books has been so different when it's the same author writing kind of, not the same story, but they're both very similar. They're both kind of these fantasy, wintry, polar worlds. And it just shows you, I think, how slight differences in the actual plot and the way the story is written can give you such a different experience. If I get to it in the next year, that'd be fantastic, but if not, the next books will definitely be going on my Polarathon TBR for next year. Apart from continuing below and possibly restarting the Winds books, I've now read everything on my shelf and on my interest TBR. You know, there's obviously the shelf TBR, but there's also the like 1,000 books on Goodreads that I'm vaguely interested in TBR. I think I've now read everything that I would consider a polar fantasy. So for next year's Polarathon, I am definitely looking for recommendations. If you've hung about this long, then definitely leave me some kind of wintry themed emoji in the comments. Thank you for sticking with me, because I know that, I mean, I've been really kind of brain foggy this week, and I'm sure these updates are a little bit rambling, more so even than usual. So I really appreciate if you're still here and you're still listening. But I really hope that I'm gonna see you in the next video. Hopefully I'll be feeling a little bit more together when we get there. I hope you've had a great Polarathon if you've been taking part. Goodbye.